Hello everybody, today's video is going to be a little look at the DfE guidance that came out on the 1st of April and also a look at the new curriculum and all this means for phonics going forward. You're very lucky today because you're not going to have to stare at my mush. I'm going to disappear into a tiny box in the corner whilst I share my presentation. I hope the video is useful for you and please share with colleagues and friends if you think they'll find it useful. So I want to look at today as a time to reflect on our current practice. It's always good to have a think about what we currently do. And whilst I am a practitioner who's confident in my phonics teaching, I'm constantly reflecting and looking at what I can deliver better for the children so that they can achieve the very best that they can. So today I want to have a look at familiarising ourselves with the documents and making sure that we don't panic into purchasing a published scheme when we potentially don't need to. I'm going to go through all of the facts from the document and how I have interpreted them. Feel free to have different opinions, but this is my opinion and my take on the documents and how I intend to move forward. Again, I hope you find it useful. So hopefully it will change screen now. I think it's going to go slow because it's a Zoom meeting and it's trying to do everything all at once. So first of all, as you all know, the Letters and Sounds document was published in 2007. And whilst I think it's a brilliant document and I based my own phonics scheme that we use in my school on Letters and Sounds, it is limited. So whilst it is basically a good resource, it does have limitations. And by educational standards, it is an old document. So I've said before that if practitioners only taught using the Letters and Sounds document, it wouldn't provide everything that we need to teach quality phonics. And that's the reason why lots of schools have adopted bits from one scheme, bits from another, and that's not pleasing to Ofsted. So we can base a perfectly sound and successful systematic synthetic phonics programme on Letters and Sounds, but it does involve some work. Ofsted will not be impressed by schools who just say we use Letters and Sounds and I use planning from this person and actions from this person and handwriting formation from this person. What they want to see is children who are progressing brilliantly, making leaps in their reading and in their writing, and that the school has a consistent and systematic synthetics programme. It doesn't have to be published. It can be something that you have come up with yourselves. So I'm going to stop saying systematic synthetics programme now because it's a bit of a mouthful. And as you can probably hear, I've got a cold. So just before we move on, systematic just means a plan, a system, a fixed plan of progression that you will use through your school, what you expect children to be taught and when. Synthetic phonics is obviously thinking about words as phonemes and breaking them up into smallest units of sound and blending them back together. Analytical phonics, put my teeth back in, is phonics that looks at the word as a whole and then breaks it down. So let's go on a little bit further and see what exactly is seen as a complete SSP. To see the full publication, you can go to the DfE document online. And as I say, it was published on the 1st of April. A complete programme is one that provides all that is essential to teach SSP to children in reception and Key Stage 1 years of mainstream primary schools, up to or beyond the standards expected by the national curriculum, and provides sufficient support for them to become fluent readers. I know we have a lot of colleagues in special needs schools who are very stressed about this at the moment. So just note that it does say mainstream primary schools. So whilst I can't find an awful lot of information about what they expect in special needs schools, I know you follow the same framework. So I'm going to keep digging on that. Throughout the document, I have got please notes on the screen, and they are things that I really want you to take notice from. So please note on this page is if your programme is new or you are developing a program based on letters and sounds, please also refer to these notes. So the fact that they've noted within this new document that some people, they're expecting people to develop a program based on letters and sounds, means that they are not saying that letters and sounds has no use whatsoever. They're just saying it doesn't fulfill everything. So that's a please note. Don't feel like you can't still base your curriculum on letters and sounds. You can. It's a base, it's a foundation. So the DfE have made so many different notes, but I just want to draw your attention to specific ones here. So they've said that letters and sounds was never a full SSP program, and I did mention that on my social media pages last week. It just so happened that this document was then produced the following day. I didn't know that was going to happen. It was just a coincidence. For a number of years, effective teaching using letters and sounds has relied on schools building a programme around the handbook themselves. So again, this says that they have seen effective teaching being based on letters and sounds. So that's another indication that you don't have to rush out and go and buy a published scheme. They've seen effective teaching based on letters and sounds. We all know you can effectively teach phonics using letters and sounds as a basis, but it's limited. And we know that as practitioners already. So what they are pointing out is they recognise that for some schools who want to improve their practice or need to based on a previous Ofsted inspection, they are saying that letters and sounds as a document is not fit for purpose. And this is what I was saying last week about how Ofsted are going in, and when you're saying I use letters and sounds, they're saying that's not a programme, that's not a scheme, it's not good enough. So that is why they have made this announcement, and why they were originally rewriting, revising and updating the letters and sounds document, and now they've pulled out of that. I'm not going into the reasons and the whys and the wherefores on that. I'm not getting involved. So it then says, we would therefore like to encourage anyone interested in creating a full SSP programme based on letters and sounds to get tested at validation. It doesn't say that this is a necessity or mandatory. So people have been messaging me saying, oh my goodness, do I have to buy one or do I need to get mine validated? You don't have to buy one and you don't have to get it validated. If you can show that your systematic synthetics phonics, see, I told you I couldn't say it. If you can prove that your SSP program is successful for your setting and ensures that all children are readers, they can't argue with you. So as long as you've got all of that in place, try not to panic. So currently, just to point out, the name Letters and Sounds is not currently trademarked, and they want to make it clear that any synthetic phonics programs that come out as a result of this document or were in the process of anyway are not endorsed by the DfE. So don't feel like that is a dead cert that this program is going to be pleasing to whoever. So they want to point that out there. Okay, so what should our SSP programs have published or not published? Well, this is what they're looking for. They want you to show that you have a commitment to the program that you are using within your school for the duration of the program. So that means whatever you use in reception, you need to use in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. It needs to be a program that runs throughout your school. That you can obviously read all this information yourself. So I'm just going to go through the yellow points that I've highlighted here. It needs to make sure that you enable children to start learning phonic knowledge and skills early in reception. I want to just point that out there, that they are not expecting nurseries, childminders to start delivering letters and sound phonic-based knowledge to children in nurseries. It quite clearly says there, start learning phonic knowledge and skills early in reception. The thing that's a little bit disappointing throughout it is there's no mention of phase 1, but there will be plenty of people, me, who will be supporting nurseries in the future in the delivery of phase 1 skills. To be honest, I have amended and updated what I would deliver to nurseries, but that's another video for another day. So they should be daily teaching sessions. They've not stipulated a certain time. I know there are certain programs that teach phonics for an awfully long time. You don't have to do that. But they define, they're clearly defined, and they have incremental sequence. So you know who is teaching what, when, building on each other, and it's clearly set out for the whole school to follow. So you begin by introducing a defined group of grapheme and phoneme correspondences that enable children to start rehearsing and applying that knowledge to reading and spelling very early on. Another thing that I've been badgering on, going on and on and on and on about in my videos anyway. So this is not new to us. We know this stuff. So we just need to calm down and realize we can do this. We've got this. And it needs to be making sure that it's accumulative. Okay, so let's move on. Has that changed? I think it did. So we'll carry on seeing what these systematic synthetic programs should have. So all of those things there, the white things, are really obvious. They're things we're doing anyway. Provide resources that support the teaching of lowercase and capital letters correctly with a clear start and finish point. So this is what I've been mentioning about making sure that your program within your school has letter formation, rhymes or stories, or something that the children can latch onto and help them form their letters correctly. That's something I've been doing in my school for years anyway, and I'm sure lots of you have been doing that too. It doesn't mean you have to go and buy a published scheme with those rhymes and ditties and things. You can produce that yourself as long as it's a consistent approach and used throughout your school. So what should systematic synthetic programs have? Let's continue. All of those white bits there, again, I felt were quite clear, quite obvious. Resources to ensure children practice and apply the core phonics they have been taught. So this refers to making sure that our reading books that we use with the children are decodable and that they have been taught the phoneme and grapheme correspondences before you give them a book with ones that they haven't covered yet. So that's a massive job, one that I'm still working on within my school to perfect it. I think I'm on like attempt number 5, and I've got plans in my head to make it even better. As I say, constantly reflecting is what makes us good practitioners. Enable children's progress to be assessed and highlight the ways in which the programme meets the needs of those children who are at risk of falling behind, including those lowest attaining 20% of children. Those children we should be making sure we're hear and read on a daily basis. So what are we going to do within our phonics programme that will support those children? And it's really important that we remember that the phonics programme that we deliver is throughout the school and doesn't then dip into somebody else's scheme for those children who are struggling. You need to continue with your programme and include what you are going to do for those children who are at risk of falling behind. So provide full guidance for teachers to support the effective delivery of the programme. I'm sure my colleagues are perfectly sick of hearing me train them on our phonics programme within our school, but it's absolutely crucial that all of you within your school are experts with your phonics programme, the programme that you are using, adopting, creating, whatever. You need to make sure that you are all delivering it in the same way. Consistency is key. So you need to be, as a phonics leader or English leader, you need to be confident that you can develop training to go alongside that. So what should SSP programs have? I just want us to please note that the texts must be fully decodable at each stage of the program. So that's going to cost money. Lots of schools still have Oxford Reading Tree books in their schools that are not phonetically decodable. We can't use those. We can't. They need to be phonetically decodable, and they need to go in the same sequence that you are using and you are delivering your phonics program. So for example, if your first phonemes that you are delivering are sat pin, there are some reading schemes that their books are decodable, but they don't teach the sounds in the same order. So when you are purchasing new reading schemes or reading books, you need to make sure that they are in line and in the same order that you are teaching your phonics, your phonemes. Okay, so there are 10 notes within the DfE guidance, and I'm just going to hopefully whiz as quickly as I can through those, so you don't all fall asleep. But I really hope that this is making you feel a little bit better. So the first note is phonics is what phonics is. It's how to apply the phonemes that we know to reading and spelling, rather than a range of optional methods and strategies for teaching children how to read. So the programme should promote the use of phonics as the route to reading unknown words before any other comprehension strategies are applied. So we need to be dedicated to the fact that we teach reading within our schools using phonics. So looking for clues within the picture, getting children to guess based on the context of the sentence are not strategies that we should be using within our teaching of reading with those children in the early years, year 1, year 2. They need to be using their phonic knowledge and skills, and those only. It should not include lists of high frequency words being given to the children to learn with the words as a shape or by sight. Now that's really complicated, because actually when it goes on to the next note, it kind of contradicts, because we have to teach common exception words that don't fit with the typical early phonics that we teach. So we need to move away from giving out lists for children to learn and send home. We need to move away from that, and we need to specifically teach the common exception words and why they are an exception. Now, this is something that I have been teaching for a while now, because I'm a firm believer that sending lists of words home for parents to learn with their children, whilst it has a place for those common exception words, they still need to be taught them at school as well. So those children need to be learning them at school, and we have been revising them, kind of thing, at home. I'm going to look at my practice on that and see what I think, but we've been teaching those words alongside any that have gone home. So we need to think about that within our own programmes. Note 2 is common exception or tricky words, as they're sometimes referenced, that include grapheme phoneme correspondences that are exceptions to those children have been taught. So programs should teach children to read and then spell the most common exception words, noting the part of the word that makes it an exception. Now, I've made videos before about how I teach words like be, me, she, he. We talk about the fact that the does not make an as in elephant sound. It makes an E sound, which is different to what we would normally expect. So I specifically teach those words as a group. We focus on the fact that the E is making an E sound, not an S sound. And we say things like, if we know how to write be, we know how to write she. And if we know how to write she, we know how to write we. I'm sure you're doing things like that within your setting as well, but that's just something to note, that the DfE have actually noted that as a separate note. So children should not be taught to join letters. Hooray! And to start every letter on the line. I'm a passionate believer that this is so physically and developmentally inappropriate for children who are just learning to form their letters. It's like adding another difficulty into it. Some of you will disagree with me there, but as I say, this is my take on the thing, on the guidance. So children may be taught to join their letters in digraphs, but that's optional. All resources designed for children should be in print without the lead. Yes. I should be remaining professional, but I got really excited when I read that. So children can be taught the simple exit strokes with the flick at the end. So when they do their D, they have a little flick at the end, but they should not be taught the leads. So note 4 should involve a routine so that teachers and children get to know what is coming next, and minimum time is spent explaining new activities. Now, I know this is going to be controversial, but again, I actually agree with this. My phonics sessions are the only structured part of my day. The children Although things slightly differ in the way we revise and rehearse things, they have a set part for each part of their phonics lesson. They know what skills they're going to rehearse, they know what's coming next. There's very little time for explanation, which means they are fast-paced and rigorous. It's when the children go off into their play that they can rehearse all of those skills in a playful, child-led way. So if you are, they mention an example of having letters in the sounds and making this your phonics lesson where they have to find letters. Children are going to get sidetracked by that. So they're not really going to be focused on the phonemes. They're going to be distracted by the sound. And I know lots of people are probably going to say, oh, I disagree with her, and switch off there. But as I say, this is my take on things, and I have to be honest to myself. And from my experience, if your phonics session is fast, rigorous, challenging and structured, all of that brilliant playful stuff can come later. So the DfE are noting that it needs to be firmly focused on intensifying the learning associated with the phonic goal, not distracted by other bits. So DfE note 5, sufficient time must be given to practice reading and writing. And that's something that I preach all the time, is that within your sessions, you must give children time to rehearse both reading and writing. They need lots and lots and lots of practice of this. And your session, if your sessions are fast-paced and rigorous, you can easily fit both elements in. And all of the resources that you use, whether it's flashcards, freezes, word cards, grapheme wall, posters, I've shown you the charts that I use. They should all match the GPCs and the progression that your own phonics program follows. So on my phonics charts, each sound is it's all progressive. So basically, as we teach them, the children can say, I know which one we're learning tomorrow, we're learning that one. And they know because we go along following the same progression as is on the charts. Note 6, the texts and books children are asked to read independently should be fully decodable for them at every stage of the programme. So even those children in year 1 and 2, they need to be able to access fully decodable books at every stage of your phonics programme. They must be composed almost entirely of words made up of grapheme phoneme correspondences that a child has learned up to that point. The only exception can be a few common exception words, but at the earliest point, that should be kept to a minimum, eek. So practicing such decodable text will help the children make sure that they are experiencing success and learn to rely on phonics strategies, which is why when I returned to reception after having a break, the first thing I did was throw away Oxford Reading Tree's The Pancakes, which was in their first section, and what reception class child could read the words in that book. If you don't know, you're better off not knowing. So DfE note 7, how these decodable books match the phonic progression of your program. So you need to make sure that within your own phonics program that you are using, you make all of the staff aware how those decodable books match the progression that you are using within your school. Organise them in a way that it's obvious as to the order. So you might use the coloured banding, but within that banding you need to make sure that, because the banding is a large section, the whole phase of a group of phonemes that you're introducing, you need to make sure that they are progressive as well. That's what I'm going to be working on when I go back to school, making sure that that is watertight. Note 8, a phonics programme should not include teaching and learning activities that are over elaborate. And I've mentioned this kind of already, so maybe some of the notes repeat themselves slightly, but this is making sure that teachers are focused on giving children opportunities to rehearse their applications, reading and writing, rather than finding letters in the sand. So that's that note there. Note 9, full guidance should include clear expectations for children's progress. So you need a map of the progression throughout your school. It should therefore enable teachers to conduct ongoing assessments to track the children's progress and identify at the earliest possible opportunity those children who have fallen off the plan of progression and at risk of falling behind. You need to make sure that the children who are at risk of falling behind need extra practice to consolidate and master the content of the programme. And I've underlined and highlighted the word extra because this should not be instead of their phonics lesson. This should be in addition to their phonics lesson. They should not suggest or provide a different SSP programme for these children. You need to show your fidelity, your commitment to your own phonics programme. And the final note, high quality training is essential for the programme to make sure that it is implemented with fidelity and consistency within your setting. So a comprehensive programme of training must ensure that the CPD and the delivery of the phonics with teaching, with all of the teachers, with all of the teaching assistants, all of the one-to-ones, all of the students that come into your setting are aware of your phonics programme. And even though it's time consuming, every time we have a student or any person come into our setting who's going to be working with the children, they are trained in our phonics programme. You should demonstrate how this will be delivered and how the training is appropriate and how everyone within your setting is a phonics expert with the delivery of your programme. I'm going to just pause the recording for a moment because my voice is a bit croaky. I'll be back in a moment. So I just want to please note again here, and I've already mentioned this point, but I think it's really important. If you're still thinking, oh, that's an awful lot of work, just remember, for a number of years, effective teaching using letters and sounds has relied on schools themselves building a programme. You are already doing lots of this effective teaching. So it's a matter of looking at what you're currently delivering and making sure that you build a programme on best practice. We recognise for those children, so if you're a school who has the need to improve or wants to improve, just remember that letters and sounds is not in its entirety a full scheme. So that was looking at all of the notes for the DfE. What I want to do now is talk to you about my take on what this means going forward. And remember, this is just my interpretation. A clear planned systematic progression throughout your setting. What is taught when, what happens if a child falls behind, and what is your whole school approach? Consistency and commitment to your progression, methods, strategies and resources. Every single member of staff adheres to your progression and your approach as a school. There's a clear progression and order in which you teach the GPCs, and you need to know what and when. There's a consistent set of actions to go with each phoneme. And if you are using phoneme charts and images, you need to ensure that the actions match the image as a hook and all the charts that match the order in which you teach your GPCs. A consistent whole school adoption of letter formation, rhymes and stories. So not one class does this and one class does that. Everyone uses the same ones. And again, this would help to link to the images that you use to introduce your GPCs to aid the retention and memory. So the ones I've developed are linked to the images on the phoneme charts, the story and the action. They all link to each other, so it's easy to remember. You need well-matched reading books that follow the order in which you teach your GPCs. Develop a well-organised system to store the books so that all staff can access the correct level book. And by correct level, I mean books that should be given to children so that they are well matched to the GPCs that have already been taught. A systematic approach to ensure that common exception words are taught, not through lists of words, but actually taught and explored. Phonetically decoding must be the focus though, and the priority, so that this is the child's first strategy when decoding. Again, for the common exception words, as well as teaching those, we do have little rhymes and stories as well to help the children remember how to read them and recognise them and spell them. An assessment approach to ensure all children make progress and those who fall behind is support at the earliest opportunity. So strategies should remain committed to your whole school approach and your whole school phonics scheme and not refer to any other. The lowest 20% must be well catered for with a clear plan of support using your whole school phonics programme. The teaching of phonics in your setting must be consistent between all members of staff. This means that training is crucial. A joined-up approach with regular CPD and monitoring will ensure that your programme is systematic, successful, and consistently delivered throughout your setting. Ensure that we hold on to what we know is best practice. If the children in our schools are achieving well and making progress, think about how this is happening. Get all of that information down on paper and produce your programme. How are you doing this year on year? Let's hold on to what is working and move forward with a reflective approach. We can all make our phonics teaching better, but we have to be confident in knowing our own cohorts and our own intake as a whole. In my view, to summarise this part of the video, the best teaching does not necessarily come from a pick it up off the shelf and deliver it approach. We could all purchase a published scheme, but is that best for your school and for your children? If you own it, you will value it and you'll deliver it with more enthusiasm, more passion and more vigour. Our children deserve the best, and if we are delivering something that has been forced upon us for ease or to please visitors, there will always be a feeling of, why are we doing it like this? We have to know the how and the why. Let's take this opportunity to scaffold something that works for our individual setting, because no two are the same. Feel like I've finished preaching that now, and hopefully you've seen that DfE guidance is actually not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's a chance for us to reflect on best practice and move forward. So as well as this new thing dropped on us on the 1st of April, we've also got to contend with the new early years framework, which came out the day before the DfE announcement. So let's not get overwhelmed in thinking that everything is changing. We still have a passion to deliver the best for every child. We all still have the experience that we had yesterday. We haven't lost that just because we've got new curriculums. The way children learn and develop hasn't changed because we have a new curriculum. It's always good to reflect, grow and develop our practice. So this is an opportunity to do just that. Sorry, I just needed to cough a bit there. So let's look at the new early years framework in terms of phonics for reading and writing. And this is going to think about nursery, preschool, childminders, school, everybody, because this is our framework. So the early years foundation stage sets the standards that all early years providers must meet to ensure that children learn and develop well and are kept healthy and safe. It's all about laying the right foundations. And just because the curriculum has changed, it doesn't mean that the foundations have changed. Things have evolved, things have improved, but it doesn't mean that all of our experience is worthless and out of the window. Let's not forget that. It's playing up again, sorry. Okay, so within the document, this is the statutory framework. This is the bit that we have to do. And I'm going to keep saying that because just because of the documents come out with guidance, it doesn't mean that that becomes our checklist and that becomes our curriculum. That is not the way it works. This document is the statutory bit, and we mustn't forget that. The educational programmes within this document are summaries for the 7 areas, from birth to 5. For each of the 7 areas, there's a paragraph. 1, maybe 2 paragraphs for each huge area from birth to 5. So it goes without saying that practitioners are not left with an awful lot of information about what they should be delivering. And if you're new to early years, that's incredibly daunting. So nurseries, you are to design your curriculum around the educational programmes, and that's the statutory bit. The early learning goals are must help children work towards, providers must help children work towards those early learning goals. They are not the curriculum. They are not what we should base our curriculum on. They are the end game, the target, where children need to be by the end of reception. So all of this document, I'm not going to read out to you because you can all read it yourselves, but I just have highlighted the bits that are really important in terms of phonics for reading and writing. So in the communication and language programme, educational programme, I've highlighted bits about children's spoken language underpinning all of the 7 areas. As I say, time and time again, communication, listening and language are so important to teach children to read and write. Pronunciation, articulation, all of those things that I go on about time and time again. This is all within the programmes. The back and forth interactions between an adult and the children, peer to peer. The quality of the conversations that we have with adults and peers throughout the day in a language-rich environment is crucial. And language-rich does not mean that you have to label everything that moves or doesn't with the children. It's making sure that there are books, there are words, there is print and logos in places that they would naturally be. Reading to the children is absolutely crucial. And what I'm delighted to see is how much emphasis is placed on the importance of learning new words and expanding their vocabulary so that they become articulate and developed speakers and communicators. The physical element in terms of phonics mentions fine motor control and precision helps with hand-eye coordination, which is later linked to early literacy. So that the later bit, I wanted to highlight that so that people are not rushing in and thinking about writing. Fine motor, games, activities and development is where it's at for those children. So literacy, it is crucial to develop a lifelong love of reading. And we all know that. We know that reading is key and nurturing a love of reading is so important. Language comprehension necessary for both reading and writing, and it starts from birth. And I've said that in my phase 1 videos time and time again. Understanding words, using words, exploring words. This is all something we need to focus on with children in our preschool settings, our schools, and making sure that children are constantly developing their vocabulary. Skilled word reading taught later involves both the speedy working out of pronunciation of unfamiliar printed words and the speedy recognition of familiar printed words. Writing involves transcription and composition. Now, for me, I wanted to highlight the fact that just because they're talking in this programme about writing and recognising print, that does not mean that preschool settings need to focus on that formally. I'm still very, very passionate about the fact that that is not the time that the children need to be looking at those things. So pronunciation, articulation, being exposed to books, looking at adults writing for a purpose so that they can make, that is still all the same for the children. So the curriculum has not changed and has not got harder for those children. The early learning goal should not be used as a curriculum in any way to limit the wide variety of and rich experience that are crucial to child development, from being able to read, from being read to frequently, to playing with friends. So early learning goals are not our curriculum. And also another important point that's in the document is sources of written or photographic evidence are not required, and teachers are not required to record the evidence. This is something I have been saying for a really long time now, because the more time practitioners are using to write everything down is less teaching time, and that's negatively impacting on the children. So why would we do that? So make sure that anything you do decide to record within your setting is purposeful, speedily done, and doesn't take you away from the children. And that's in the statutory framework, and it's a really important note to point out. So these are what the early learning goals for the end of reception look like. So just have a little look at those when you go into the document. Nothing really has changed. The wording has changed, but the standard hasn't. They're the things that we have been teaching already. So even though the standard has changed, I don't want nursery practitioners, preschools to think, oh, the standard has changed, so we've got to start teaching letters from in nursery. That's not the case. The foundations that you need to lay are exactly the same. But I do have a few other ideas about how we can do that. But that, as I've said, is another video. So practitioners working with the youngest children are expected to ensure a strong foundation for children's development in the 3 prime areas. The specific areas will come with everything else. But in order to make sure the specific areas develop, the 3 prime areas are where the preschool children should be focused. So think about that communication and language programme, how important that is for teaching children to read and write. This is particularly important in developing language and extending vocabulary. Yes. So the framework does not prescribe a particular teaching approach. So just because certain schemes, published SSPs, are producing documentation, that means nursery children can access letters and sounds and phonemes and graphemes in their nursery year. This does not mean that that is the right approach. You need to think about your approach in your setting. Children learn by leading their own play and by taking part in play, which is guided by adults. This is all about that interaction, making sure that adults play with children and interact. The word guided could be misconstrued as people thinking that it's all adult-led, but we do guide children when we're playing with them because that's how we interact and sneak in those learning opportunities. Practitioners need to decide what they want children in their setting to learn and the most effective way to teach it. So nursery settings, if you want to have a phonics programme, you can develop a phonics programme that's based on laying those foundations for communication, listening, and all of those wonderful things that children need to be good readers and writers. As children grow older and move into the reception year, there should be greater focus on teaching the essential skills and knowledge in the specific areas of learning, and this will help children prepare for year 1. So this is the expectation. When children get older and in their reception year, this is where the focus comes for those essential skills of reading and writing and teaching of phoneme and grapheme correspondences. So the characteristics of effective learning are still there, although there's not as much detail as there was before, but you can go in and have a look at those. And now what I'm going to point out to you is the fact that whilst the educational programmes are so limited in what they're explaining to practitioners, they're actually giving you a sense of autonomy and freedom to develop your approach and what you're going to deliver to make sure that those children have brilliant communication and language. So here we also have 2 non-statutory guidance materials, and I've highlighted non-statutory because people start to think, oh, I'm not going to read the early years statutory framework, I'm just going to look at development matters or birth to 5. But actually you should always start with the bit that's statutory, because these 2 documents are people's interpretation of what it is and how you should deliver it. So whilst they're useful, especially the birth to 5 one, they're not statutory, and it's really important to remember that. So first of all, we're going to look at the development matters one, which is the DfE publication. So first of all, they say that the changes have been made, making sure that the educational programmes are longer and more in depth and contain examples of things that you could do with children. There is a new focus on early language and extending vocabulary, which is brilliant. I've been talking to my colleagues in school about extending vocabulary now for the last few years, as lots of practitioners have. Extending vocabulary has become central to our teaching. So what this means in practice, the new development matters, which is non-statutory, for the early years foundation stage can help inform your approach to your curriculum, putting educational programmes into practice. So it's useful, but it's not statutory. So it's shorter, about 2/3 of the length of the previous development matters, because that's to allow practitioners more freedom to develop the right broad curriculum for the children that you work with, because as I said earlier, no 2 establishments are the same, no 2 cohorts are the same. So the age bands have been simplified to avoid tracking activities that don't support child development. We should not be having tick lists based on development matters or birth to 5. That is not what they are there for. They are simply there as a guide to give you ideas about what children might do and what practitioners may do to help them to develop further. They are not a "this is how children learn A, B, C, D." They should not be used in that way. So now there are 3 instead of 6 age ranges: birth to 3, 3 to 4, and children in reception. So there's more room for professional judgment, which I know is difficult, particularly if you are new to early years. However, it's really important that you, as a setting, support one another in your professional judgment so that you can make your judgments based on your knowledge and experience. The early learning goals summarise the knowledge, skills and understanding that children will have gained by the end of reception. And I'm going to say that again. Pre-reception providers do not need to use the early learning goals at all, but the changes are included so that you can see where children need to be. And that's great practice. We do that within schools as well, where we need to know exactly where the whole school progressed from there to there to there to there. It doesn't mean we refer to it in our teaching. The early learning goals should not be used as a curriculum. Have I said that before? Anyway, so what should nursery leaders and managers and nursery practitioners be doing according to the Development Matters guidance? Well, first of all, I kind of got a little bit disheartened by the fact that it said nursery leaders and managers should design your curriculum around the new educational programmes, and nursery practitioners, you should speak to your nursery manager about what the changes you're going to adopt. For me, best practice would be incorporating all of your views to come up with your curriculum, because if you all own it, you will all deliver it with more enthusiasm. So myself, I would have put nursery practitioners, leaders, managers, all of you together. You're all practitioners, develop your curriculum. But that's just my opinion. And then childminders, it's got some documentation there for you to help implement the changes as well. And I'm sure, like many childminders I've come into contact with, you have lots of groups that you work with so that you're not on your own and working alone in this. Just a note on Ofsted here. Development Matters is a non-statutory curriculum and only guidance for the early years. So it's available to support providers in their delivery. They can use it or not, use bits and not other bits. And as it's non-statutory, Ofsted will not have regard to it when they're carrying out their inspections. And it's up to providers to decide how they approach the curriculum. So I keep being asked the question, have the standards changed in phonics? And I'm going to go through with you now what I believe is the case. So planning to help a child to develop their language is vital. That's the same. We've been saying that for ages. The curriculum needs to be ambitious. Carefully sequencing will help children to build their learning over time. We know that. So within schools, we've already talked about the fact that we need to carefully sequence how we're going to introduce GPCs and what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Within nursery settings, I think it would be good to have a sequence of how you are going to teach early pre-phonics skills, not the letters and sounds, but all of those pre-phonics skills. Young children learning is often driven by their interests. Plans need to be flexible. We all know this already. The depth in early learning is much more important than covering lots of things in a superficial way. So really, is there any point in teaching the children SAT, IPN in nursery when they're not developmentally ready? Should we not make sure that we truly embed all of those pre-phonics skills so that when they start school, they can deliver it and they're exposed to it for the first time in a really meaningful way? Let's make sure that the depth in early learning in preschool settings is all about those pre-phonics skills. So within the document, you have got this side of the columns, which is children in reception will be learning to, and these are just suggestions, not a tick list of where stages they need to go through, and then examples of how you might support this. Please remember that the examples are not statutory. So when you're looking at those and thinking, oh my goodness, they need to be able to do that and they need to be able to do that. No, they don't. So here it says, teach and model correct letter formation. If that's within reception, yes. That doesn't mean that these children need to be doing that in nursery. Phonics, have the standards changed? So over here again, we've got birth to 3. These things along here are all those things that I've been harping on about in phase 1 anyway. So no, the standards have not changed. These are all the things that we need to do. Phase 1, is it not? Yes, it is. So 3 to 4 literacy. Understand that print has meaning, print has different purposes. I've been talking about this in the videos for before. So these standards are not different. These are things that we do as good practice anyway. Phase 1 skills. Develop their phonological awareness that they can spot and suggest rhymes, count and clap syllables in words, recognise words with the same initial sound. That's alliteration. So those are all phase 1 skills. So whilst they're saying that letters and sounds is not fit for purpose, they're not saying that the things within that book should not be used anymore, because they're still in this current curriculum. Engage in extended conversations about stories, learning new vocabulary. This is brilliant. This is great. That's what we want. We want children to come to school articulate with a broad range of vocabulary. It will just make it all fit into place so much better. Please note this bit within the 3 to 4 literacy. Use some of their print and letter knowledge in their early writing. For example, writing a pretend shopping list that starts at the top of the page, write for mummy. Write some or all of their name. Write some letters accurately. So this is starting to get practitioners thinking that they need to buy a published scheme or start teaching letters and sounds for their 3 to 4-year-olds. That's not the case. What this means is that children should be given a purpose, model how to write so that they are mark making, early writing. What's the understanding writing development? I talked about this within that video. So this is all about mark making, celebrating those marks. In terms of writing some or all of their name or some letters accurately, or writing for mummy, well, for mummy is going to be one of the words that they love the most because it's mummy. So of course they may have written cards for a birthday or for Mother's Day, and they may have practiced writing a No doubt it's probably not going to be formed correctly, but they will have been making marks, and we should celebrate that. Write some or all of their names. Some children will have a natural interest to write their name, and if they do, you can perhaps support them in learning to write their name, not by copying, not by overwriting, but just showing them how to do it and then let them have a go. Remember, this is all from the non-statutory curriculum guidance. This is not statutory. If they show an interest, go for it, but it's not statutory. And in terms of writing some letters accurately, those letters will be the ones that mean something to them. The letters from their name, the beginning letters of mummy and daddy and their brother or sister's first letter in their name. That does not mean that you need to start teaching them phonics and you need to start teaching them how to write letters in the hope that they'll be able to write some accurately. These will all be meaningful to them. So some of their names in there, some of the letters in their name will be spelled correctly, some will be interested in writing their name, and some will be able to write for mummy, because that means something to the children and has a purpose because of all that wonderful modelling you have done with those 3 to 4-year-olds. In reception, read a few common exception words matched to the school's phonic programme. We've talked about that. Read simple phrases and sentences made up of words with known letter sound correspondences, and where necessary, a few exception words. Please note that it's really important that children reread books to build up their confidence and their fluency. So don't feel with your reading books, once the children have read them once, that they should never read them again. It's really important that they develop that confidence and fluency practicing rereading books. I'm going to have another coughing fit, so I will just pause this recording for a moment. Okay, so that was the non-statutory development matters, and this is the non-statutory birth to 5 matters. This is the guidance that's written by the sector for the sector. So that's 16 huge early years organisations that have come together through such a long period to create this document. It's absolutely a colossal document and provides excellent resources. That said, it is still not statutory and should not be used as a tick list or the curriculum for your children. It's not a they can do this, then they can do this, then they can do this. You can use this to help create and shape your approach, but please remember this is not statutory and is not the curriculum. So within the document, there are wonderful things that have remained like this from previous Birth to 5 matters, and the document's online and you can download it for free as well. Computer's tired. It's got lovely things in here to describe all the important things about literacy, and it's well worth a read. It doesn't have age bands throughout the document. Instead, it talks about ranges, and they have produced a key here to support particularly early years practitioners who are new to the role in knowing what typically ranges would look like. But it's really important to know that all children are on their own trajectory and all children develop at their own speed, and nobody goes through this line of development. It spirals and goes off in all different directions, and everybody's unique and different. So the age ranges are there, but they should not be used again as a tick list for children. The guidance on possible development trajectories should not be taken as necessary steps nor assumed to be a particular order for individual children. The guidance should not be used as a checklist, and that is something that every single person would say to you, visitors, anybody, to your school or your setting. So you can see here that we've got sections here. So you've got the ranges for, you've got the area, listening and attention, the unique child, what they might be doing. You have here positive relationships, what adults might do, and what your environment might look like to help aid the different stages that children might go through. So again, this should not be used as a tick list or they can do that and highlight that and that tell me where they are at. This is just guidance and the sorts of things you can do as an adult within a setting or within a school, and what your continuous provision might look like. Please note that this is range 6 here, and it talks about beginning to form recognisable letters independently. That's the same kind of thing that I talked about before, letters that are important to the children that they have seen around the environment. It does not involve formal teaching of phonics within preschool settings. Within all of these ranges here, you will see lots of information that were all linked to the old phase 1 from letters and sounds, the old things I've been talking about since I started this page and for many, many years beforehand. Phase 1, just pointing that out to you there. So you've got claps and syllables, alliteration, rhyme and rhythm. These things haven't changed. So have the standards have changed? No, they haven't. They're the same. They're just presented in a different way, which makes people panic a little bit. This should not be used to form checklists. Please watch understanding writing development when you look at the writing element to this, because it really will support your practice in line with all of the recommendations and guidance that are on here. So, has the standards changed? Children still develop at different rates. Laying the foundations for reading and writing are still crucial. Rushing children onto learning GPCs before developing the skills of listening, communication, memory, tuning in, rhyme, alliteration, oral blending and segmenting is still developmentally inappropriate. Rushing children onto learning GPCs before they develop clear articulation and pronunciation with a rich, varied and broad vocabulary is still not going to lay the best foundation. We still want to use the best methods and strategies to teach reading and writing. Children still need the same skills to be able to develop into confident, independent and successful readers and writers. And preschool children should still be focused on developing the skills and crucial phonetic foundations so that the GPCs can be introduced from reception in a rigorous, systematic, synthetic phonics programme of your choosing, whether you create it, buy it, or whatever. So what now? I'm thinking about how I can offer further support. Nurseries, do you want to develop your own phonics program that is developmentally appropriate, belongs to your setting and can be tailored to suit your intake and your children's needs? Schools, do you want to build on your own best practice, producing your own bespoke, systematic synthetic program based on the best bits of what you're already doing, whilst improving and updating your approach? If you do, then I am thinking of having support group Zoom meetings. Not quite sure exactly how this will work yet, but I need to gauge an interest to see if anybody would be interested in this. So the first Zoom would be about me sharing my journey on developing my own school phonics program. For nurseries, that would be based on phase 1, and for schools, it would be based on phase 1 to 5. Opportunities for us to discuss where we're currently at and how we can move forward. That will include where I'm currently at and how I'm going to move forward. After the initial Zoom, there will be a 2-week time period to begin the journey. And during this time, you can email me any questions or updates on your progress, and that will help form the focus of the following Zoom meeting. So the second Zoom would be addressing the questions and updates and just sharing practice and ideas. If this sounds like something that your nursery or school would be interested in, please email me at thephonicsqueen@gmail.com and I will get back to you with more details. There will be a small cost involved, so bear that in mind, but it would only be small just to cover my time spent on preparing everything. But yeah, if you're interested, send me an email and I'll see what happens and where we can go forward with it. And finally, and this is not how I wanted to announce it, so there is some very exciting news coming up for the Phonics Queen. And over the next probably the next week, I will be putting together a video to reveal my exciting news, and I'm so excited about it. This has been in the pipeline long before any of these announcements and things have started, so it's nothing to do with that, but yeah, I'm really excited to share that with you. So sorry for the long video. I hope you found it useful. Sorry for my croaky voice. It's much better than it was yesterday in that I can actually speak. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Share it far and wide, and if you know where I am if you need me.